All right, friends, so I've been on this thing since the start, right? From the offseason signings through OTAs, through every single minicamp update, all the way through training camp. I've been tracking this roster piece by piece for months now. And yesterday, we finally got our first real look at this team when they took the field against the Green Bay Packers in the preseason opener. And I'll be honest with you, going in, I had a pretty good idea of what this game was going to be about. It was supposed to be about the backup quarterback battle, plain and simple. But after watching the whole thing, breaking it down, going through what actually happened on that field, I walked away with something totally different than what I expected. There's a name that came out of this game that wasn't even part of the conversation heading in. And what happened last night might change how we're all looking at this quarterback room going forward. I'm not going to spoil it right now. I want to build this up the right way for you, so stick with me, because I'm about to break down every winner and every loser from this game. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this one all the way through. Hello, Steelers fans. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. All right, so let me get into it, because this is the part I've been building up to. The name that stood out to me more than anybody else on that field last night was Drew Allar. Now look, I know the score was already lopsided by the time the game ended, but I want you to remember where things stood when he actually walked onto that field. The Steelers were down 9-7 in the third quarter. Offense hadn't really found any rhythm, and that's exactly when Drew Allar got his shot. And honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. This is a rookie, first game as a pro, and instead of settling in slow, he comes out and just takes over the entire second half of that football game. By the time it was all said and done, Drew Allar finished 10 for 13, 154 yards, and 3 total touchdowns, 2 through the air and 1 on the ground. And here's the thing that really got me. It wasn't just that he put points on the board, it's how he did it. 3 drives, 3 touchdowns, back to back to back. That's not a fluke. That's a guy who walked in there and just took control. His very first pass as a pro went for 75 yards, hit the receiver right in stride. And honestly, that throw alone told me everything I needed to know about his arm and his eyes downfield. And I gotta connect this to something bigger, because this isn't just about one good night. What I saw from Drew Allar last night lines up exactly with what I've been hearing about him since he got to Pittsburgh, that Mike McCarthy and this coaching staff have been working with him on cleaning up his footwork, cleaning up his mental processing, all the stuff that people kept pointing to as his weaknesses coming out of college. And last night, that accuracy people used to question, it was on display to every level of the field. Short, intermediate, deep, he was hitting all of it. Now, I'm not saying this kid is your franchise guy tomorrow. This was against third and fourth string Green Bay Packers players. I want to be honest about that context. But when you combine the physical talent with the coaching he's getting right now, I think this is exactly the kind of start that gets a young quarterback the benefit of the doubt going forward. Now, I don't want you to think this game was only about the rookie, because Will Howard actually played a really solid game too, and I think it deserves real credit. He came in, led a nice 2-minute drive that ended in a touchdown, and from what I saw, he was getting the ball out on time, accurate, making good decisions. 2 of his 3 drives ended in punts, so it wasn't a perfect night by any means, but I didn't see anything from Will Howard that hurt his case either. And that actually brings me right into the situation I think a lot of you are really watching closely, which is this backup quarterback battle between Will Howard and Mason Rudolph. Because from what I saw last night, Will Howard was clearly the better of the two. Mason Rudolph had a drive where he nearly got into the end zone but ended up getting stopped on downs, and he was taking sacks on top of that. So if you're grading this one game strictly quarterback versus quarterback for that QB2 role, Will Howard wins that comparison. But I'll be honest with you, I think this front office already has a strong feeling about what Mason Rudolph brings during the regular season. So this might come down to whether they're willing to carry 4 quarterbacks or whether Will Howard has to keep stacking performances like this one to really force their hand. Now, stepping back from the quarterback room for a second, let's talk about the actual final result here, because the Steelers walked away with a 28-9 win over the Green Bay Packers. Early on, it was rough. There were penalties, some sloppiness on offense, but once Drew Allar got rolling in the second half, this thing turned into a blowout in a hurry. And a big part of that second-half surge, honestly, came from the connection between Drew Allar and Kaden Wetjen. I mean, that first pass I mentioned earlier, the 75-yarder, that was to Kaden Wetjen, and he made a defender miss after the catch to turn a good gain into an even bigger one. He also caught a touchdown pass and finished with 2 catches for 79 yards. And what stood out to me here is that this guy is showing off receiving skills that honestly didn't get a ton of shine back in college. If injuries hit this receiver room at any point this season, I think Kaden Wetjen has shown enough now that he could step in and actually contribute. Sticking with the rookie theme here, Germie Bernard had himself a really nice debut too. He was working as the #1 receiver with the first-team offense, and you could tell Mason Rudolph already trusts him, probably from all those reps together in practice when the starters are getting rest. 4 catches, 51 yards, and he actually looked good running after the catch. Reliable hands the whole night. He almost had a 5th catch that would have been a touchdown, but he only got 1 foot down in bounds. That's the kind of thing that works in college, but not in the league, so that's a small adjustment he's going to have to make, but overall a really encouraging first look. Now switching over to the defensive side for a second, Asante Samuel Jr. was somebody who really impressed me. He played outside, he played some slot, and he had multiple pass breakups in the limited time the first-team defense was actually out there. With Joey Porter Jr. still dealing with his injury situation and also seeking more money on a new deal, having a guy like Asante Samuel Jr. who can slide into different spots on the back end, that's exactly the kind of versatility that matters when your depth gets tested. And there were a handful of other names that flashed last night too that I think are worth mentioning. Devin Boykin had a nice night. He got a tackle for loss and also broke up a pass. He's more of a guy fighting for a practice squad spot, but he made his presence felt. Robert Tonyan, the tight end, had a really strong connection with both quarterbacks, but especially with Will Howard. Actually caught what I thought was the best throw of the night from Will Howard, a real nice seam throw that split the coverage and got all the way down to the 1-yard line. Gabriel Rubio held up well at nose tackle, showed a good block shed against the run, and honestly, for a guy that a lot of people questioned as a draft pick, he's already proven he can be a solid rotational piece. Jamin Davis picked up multiple sacks working from the edge, and he's a guy converted from linebacker who's really just trying to hang on to a roster spot any way he can. And Kyler Bow finished the game strong too, picked up a couple sacks in the 4th quarter, kind of building on what was already a solid preseason from him a year ago. Now, not everybody had a night to be proud of, and I got to talk about the guys who didn't have it going for them, starting with Kaleb Johnson. This is a situation where I'm genuinely a little concerned, because this was supposed to be a game where he gets fed the ball, gets a real workload to show what he can do, and instead he only got 2 carries for 3 yards total. That's about as small a role as you can hand a guy in a game that actually matters for his roster spot. And honestly, that usage tells me something about where this coaching staff might be leaning with him. Right there with him is Eli Heidenreich, who actually got more carries than Kaleb Johnson, 9 of them, but only averaged 2.2 yards a carry against guys who were mostly 3rd and 4th stringers. I wasn't expecting him to look bad exactly, but I needed to see more explosiveness, more of that make-you-miss ability, especially as a pass catcher out of the backfield, and it just wasn't really there last night. And then there's the issue that honestly frustrated me the most watching this game, which is the special teams penalties. I lost count, but it felt like 6 or 7 flags on special teams alone. Holding calls, personal fouls, way too much of it. And that falls right on Danny Crossman. I'll be straight with you. I wasn't thrilled with the move from Danny Smith to Danny Crossman this offseason, and last night didn't do much to change my mind on that. And that penalty problem ties directly into a bigger concern I have with Mike McCarthy as the head coach here. Because if you look at his track record, discipline and penalties have followed his teams before. And seeing this kind of sloppiness show up in game 1, that's not something I want to just brush off. There's plenty of time to clean it up before the regular season starts, but it's something I'm going to be watching closely as these preseason games continue. So if you're asking me to put a grade on this whole performance, I'm landing somewhere around an A-B+. They won the game, the second half was genuinely impressive, and what Drew Allar did once he got in there was about as good a debut as you could realistically hope for. So that's the full breakdown for you, from Drew Allar stealing the show to Will Howard quietly building his case, right down to the guys who still have a lot to prove before this roster gets finalized. Let me know down in the comments who your MVP was from this one and who you think needs to step it up in the next preseason game. Appreciate you sticking around for the whole breakdown, and I'll see you in the next one.